You're listening to the Deep Purple Podcast, a fan podcast about one of the most legendary bands of all time, Deep Purple. We take a look at the music, history, and people behind the band Deep Purple and beyond. Welcome to the Deep Purple Podcast, the first and only podcast devoted to one of the greatest rock bands in history, Deep Purple. Today's episode is episode 15, Who Do We Think We Are? The End, Part 2. And coming to you from the rainy suburbs of Chicago, I'm your host, Nathan Beaudry.
And from the biggest little state in the nation, I'm your co-host, John Black Knight Matola.
Ah, the Black Knight. That is
yeah.
If you want to keep up to date on the show, you can subscribe in Apple Podcasts or your preferred podcatcher. You can also subscribe on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. All of those spots. DeepPurplePodcast.com is where to get show notes and all the information. And hey, listen, if you listen to the show on your drive to work, if we bring a little joy to your morning commute, keep you entertained, you can also always throw us a few bucks on Patreon, become a patron. We'd really appreciate that. And please give us a rating on Apple Podcasts, for God's sake. We're still kind of languishing there at around 12, I think, ratings. And despite all the great positive feedback we've gotten and all the Twitter responses and all that, we still need a few more great reviews on Apple Podcasts. That'd be a huge help. All right, so how you been this week, my friend?
Not bad. Very good. Which is very good is another way of saying not bad.
Yeah, bring out your thesaurus and give us a few more.
Yeah, great. Awesome. I don't know. So great. What's happening in the world of Deep Purple?
Well, in the world of Deep Purple, so we were on this past Saturday, July 27th, as we record this. So it'll probably be about a week later when you hear it. We were on T-Bone's Prime Cuts. So he did a special episode featuring what is now being known as the Deep Dive Podcast Network, which is 3 amazing podcasts, including Sabbath Bloody Podcast, Skynyrd Reconsidered, and our show, which Terry Mathley, the host of T-Bone's Prime Cuts, say is the only 3 podcasts that he listens to. So that's pretty big praise.
Awesome.
And as you know, we recorded a little segment for a show explaining what we do on this show, and hand-selected 6 songs to play on the show, which he played, which was great. So I think we started off with April from the Mark I lineup.
Now, admittedly did not hear it. Did he do the whole thing, or did he do it after the orchestra part? Do you know?
He ended up playing the whole thing. He's a purist, so
hopefully
we don't turn too many people off with that long intro to that song.
Wow, he went deep. Yeah, I mean, talk about deep cuts. He went all the way.
He did, and as he's playing the songs, he tweets them, and then people just start responding right away about, "Oh, I love this song," and that. So there's a lot of good feedback. We've picked up some new Twitter followers for sure. And if you're coming here courtesy of T-Bone's Prime Cuts, thanks for listening, and hopefully you enjoy our discussions of the band. It was a great episode. He does release it as a podcast as well, so you can subscribe to it and listen to it on. It's part of the Daily Boom, I believe, is the podcast, and it'll say in the title that it's his show. So yeah, it kicked off with some Sabbath cuts, some Lynyrd Skynyrd cuts, and then ended with Deep Purple, which was great. And yeah, we did April from the Mark I lineup. We did Bloodsucker and Pictures of Home from Mark II. Did, I think, Sail Away from Mark III and Soldier of Fortune from Mark III, and then ended it with Getting Tighter from the Mark IV lineup. So, just those fair. Yeah, nice little lineup. It was fun listening to it, especially since I've been on a fast and not listening to any Mark III or IV or anything yet. So it was nice to hear that stuff again for the first time in a long time.
Yeah, well, we know that if I was part of that weight loss challenge, I lost my chip like the day after we recorded.
Yeah, you needed to cleanse yourself from who do we think we are, and you had to listen to Burn right away. So
I couldn't help it. I'm so bad. It was so good. It was fattening. But I'll save all discussion for that for the next episode.
Yeah, we could easily get into that now. I think the Burn episode is going to be a long episode.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to put as much, like when creating the show notes, trying to put as much of the kind of lead up to Coverdale and Hughes joining into our next episode, which is going to be a dive into how, you know, the background behind those two guys before Deep Purple. And then we'll kind of go through how they were recruited and all that. And then we can just kind of hit burn right away just with the whole writing process and everything. So it should be fun. And other news, we got a kind of funny YouTube comment that I wanted to share with you because it's kind of semi-negative, but also positive. So I thought it was good. So this guy, Yuri Lemontsev on YouTube says, I find it odd that you guys presume to have the competence to host a podcast on Deep Purple without even having listened to all their studio albums. It is one thing if you had listened to the Morse stuff and decided that you genuinely don't like it, but to not even give it a chance, a disappointing attitude. Apart from that one complaint, I found this excellent. So I thought it was kind of funny that kind of dig on us and then like said, oh, he loves it. But yeah, I'm sorry that we give the impression that we don't, or that we're dismissing the Morse stuff. I think if
we haven't gotten to it yet.
Right. I think it's that we have admitted in past episodes that we're just not that familiar with the Morse lineup.
Yeah, I mean, if I would say that anybody that is listening to our podcast now is more, I would guess, is more interested or more into the first or the early classic eras of the band. Not to say that the current isn't just as good, but you talk to most people about Deep Purple, and they're going to be looking at, like, you know, Mark II, Mark III. But I mean, just because we checked out doesn't mean that we don't like the albums, or we're not. I mean, yeah, we're not confident about them, but we also haven't gotten to them yet. Like, when we eventually get to those albums, we're going to listen to them the same way that we listen to these and give them a fair shot. And like you've said in the past, Nate, we're going to give them a chance. Like, we might even find that we're just like, oh, wow, this is like, I didn't realize how good this was. And which is what we're kind of hoping for.
Yeah. And I've listened to a few of the albums in the Steve Morse era, just not I haven't listened. I admit I haven't listened to every one, and I definitely don't have the same, like, I'm not as tuned into them. So like if I put on Perpendicular again, which I admittedly probably haven't listened to in 15, 20 years, I'm going to be like, oh yeah, I forgot about this. Oh yeah, this part's good. There's going to be parts I remember, but I'm not going to be like putting on Burn where I know every note, you know?
Yeah,
so,
exactly. But I mean, you can't please everybody. So
yeah, so definitely not dismissing the Steve Morse stuff. And, you know, as we've said before, we're not Deep Purple or music historians or journalists. We're just a couple of fans who, apart from wanting to explore the old stuff, we do want to discover new stuff and learn new stuff and listen to new stuff, not just listen to the old stuff that we're familiar with. So, you know, by, you know, a year from now, I would think we'll have heard, you know, tons more Deep Purple material than we've heard before, and be a lot more familiar with it. So, and, you know, I know Rye from Sabbath Bloody Podcast kind of went into his whole thing with kind of a negative attitude, not attitude is the wrong word, negative feeling about Dio and about the non-Ozzy stuff, but he came out of it. He's just like hooked on Dio, Sabbath now, and loves the Tony Martin stuff. So he's like, you know, he kind of went through a similar thing with us where he got acquainted with stuff he wasn't as familiar with, and turns out he loves it. And I'm sure the same thing's going to happen with us. So those are the only kind of comments we've got going on. Thanks to our patrons. We do have a couple. Clay Wambacher and Steve Seaborg is a new patron of alltheworldsastage.net. He has some kind of rock and roll memorabilia sort of shirts and things for sale if you want to check them out. So big thanks to both of those guys for supporting the show.
Cool.
And with that, today's episode might be a little bit shorter, but, you know, we can tend to drone on. So who knows? Maybe it'll be our longest episode yet.
Yeah, it's going to be shorter, as we already just like wasted like how much time like going on and on.
Yeah, we're almost at the 10-minute mark, I think.
But that's just us. So.
That's just us. Yeah, so we just wanted to talk a little bit about, so this is guaranteed, I don't know why I'm focused on getting our video record. So it's a kind of bonus tracks episode, which are historically always blocked by YouTube for some reason. So this will
We'll
probably
see.
be blocked by YouTube. If you're hearing this, you're probably in some special area that allows it, and thanks for checking this out. It can vary between those 2 islands off the coast of Canada or all American territories. We never know.
Yeah. If this is blocked, hello, Uruguay. You're the only people that can see this.
We thank you for checking us out. Yeah, I don't know why it is. We can play Machine Head in its entirety being fine, but then we play, John Lord's backwards piano, and they're like, nope, denied.
I love it. I still love it.
So yeah, we're going to talk a little bit more about the background of what was going on in the band right now. We'll talk about some of the songs too. So Jerry Bloom, who wrote tons of great Deep Purple books, in the book The Road of Golden Dust, he talks a little bit more about the Ian Gillan and Ritchie Blackmore feuding that was going on at this point, and he tends to lend more of the blame on Ian Gillan than you maybe traditionally hear. A lot of times it can be kind of perceived that it's like, oh, Ritchie was just impossible to work with, and that's what the problem. But Ian Gillan will admit as much too, that he does take some of the blame. So he talks about Ian Gillan's girlfriend at the time, Zoe Dean, and saying that like she would travel with him when they were going on the road and everything. And she was traveling with him, but the other band members were traveling by themselves, and I guess getting into typical rock and roll hijinks. And Zoe would kind of report back to the wives and girlfriends back home about what the other guys in the band were doing and what they were up to, which was maybe not really endearing the rest of the band to her, getting them in trouble. And, hey, if they were doing those sorts of things, I guess shame on them. And then John Lord has a quote to Mike Erickson, who you might remember as Trinkelbonker, who mentioned us on his blog, the Deep Purple, Swedish Deep Purple historian. And John Lord said that Ian was a prima donna. On stage, he played a prima donna, and off stage, he was a prima donna. So this was an interview in 1981, kind of giving his feeling on Ian Gillan. Gillan started to feel isolated from the band and started traveling separately. And I think they gave him the ultimatum. The band said, hey, you can either leave your girlfriend at home or you can travel separately. And he decided to travel separately. And apparently he was with this woman for, I think, almost 10 years. They were together before they broke up through most of the 70s. So again, some of these things are rumors. We don't know 100%, but Ian Hansford, who is a roadie for Elf, tells a story about during a song one night, Ritchie took his guitar off, threw it on stage, and walked off after Ian Gillan told him, "Look at me, you see you next Tuesday." And Gillan walked, I guess Blackmore walked off and told this roadie and said, "Hey, I've had it with this guy. I don't want to play with him anymore." So another story that doesn't paint Ian in the best light.
I mean, all right, I gotta be with Team Blackmore on that one. I don't blame him for that.
No, yeah, especially it's not like he just called him that backstage. He called it to him, presumably on mic.
Oh my God, could you imagine going to work and talking to your coworkers like that? That stuff would not fly.
No, I'm pretty sure I'd definitely have the rest of that day off, or at least when my boss found out, I would have I'd have a nice extended vacation, and rightly so. Not really good for the workplace.
Nate, can you come to my office and bring everything in your desk with you?
Exactly.
We have to have a chat.
Bring your keys and your phone. So Gillan had started at this point working on his Cher Kazoo project, which I read somewhere that one of the places reporting on it called it Shea Kazoo, like shit, CHEZ, Shea Kazoo.
Shea Kazoo. It's
welcome to Shea Kazoo.
It's very fancy. Would you like to start off with some escargot?
So he'd gotten into the studio with Glover and Lord and Ray Fenwick and completed some of the songs. And Gillan at this time was also producing an album by the band Jerusalem. Well, I always just kind of think of Nazareth, who Glover produced. I don't know if it was just kind of one of those biblical type bands. That band broke up, and members of the band formed another band called Pussy. Very subtle. With and Ian Gillan produced that as well. So yeah, very to the point. And I guess Gillan, and maybe we could save more of this for our Shea Kazoo episode, but he'd been in talks with Disney about developing this idea, and he called like Share Kazoo. I'm calling it Shea Kazoo. He called Share Kazoo an animal/space/music travelogue fantasy. So if you've heard the Share Kazoo album, you can kind of see that there's a lot going on. It's a very weird, whimsical, fun sort of, if disjointed, collection of songs, and it's incomplete, but I love it. I enjoyed listening to that album a lot.
That's one I haven't heard for a while.
Yeah, I remember hearing that, must have been at your place years ago, and listening to that Hogwash song and running out to Hogwash, and then running out to get my copy. And I had this job where I used to clean a church, and that was like something I, for some reason, was always listening to that album. So I was just thinking about like being in the boiler room of this church, sweeping up, listening to like Hogwash and Driving Me Wild and all those songs. Some really, really good songs on that album.
Oh man, yeah, I gotta say, when all those kind of reissues or like Deep Purple family albums and stuff came out, like those imports, like back in, what were they? What's the 90s, right?
Yeah, it was like the early 90, 91, 92.
Yeah. I have to say that's probably out of everything, like even more so than Kiss, because Kiss didn't really have that kind of thing. Like they would have like bootlegs and stuff from like shows, like stuff you've heard before. But I mean, in terms of like sheer, like just like music that you've like haven't heard anywhere else, just stuff like that, or like the Butterfly Ball or something, like completely like different projects. Like Deep Purple, like corner the market on that stuff, because every time we would go to Sam's Records or something, there would just be like some other wild solo project by somebody related to Deep Purple, and I would just be like, oh, I gotta have this CD, and spend like $20 on it or whatever exorbitant price it was.
Yeah, they were expensive. And the hunt for them, like I'd go in, I could walk in like whatever Caldor at the time, I don't know if anyone listening even remembers, like I'd walk into Caldor and be like, they sell like 11 CDs. Maybe Butterfly Ball is in there somehow. Like I would just always be on the lookout. And I remember going to like the big Tower Records in Boston.
Yeah.
And I'd go to, look. And when you tried to search for like Butterfly Ball,
yeah,
the band Iron Butterfly had that album Ball. And it was just always, you like search for it and you're like, oh no, it's just Iron Butterfly Ball again. I'd always be disappointed, even though I've never listened to that album.
Search and be like, damn it,
not this album again.
But yeah, I would say like, yeah, that place in Warwick, I think, is where I got most of my CDs from. I don't think I really got much when I went up to, and I admittedly didn't travel up to Boston a lot. It was like just maybe 20 minutes down the street from here, and they had a really great kind of import CD store called Sam's Records, which is of course no longer. I don't even remember them selling records. It was just all CDs. Mm-hmm. And the reason that place was awesome too was like not only would they have like the new CDs on the release date, but they would be at least like $3 to $4 cheaper than the mall, which was like right across the street.
And they all like, you'd find all those ones with that strip of Japanese like down the left-hand side, like Japanese imports. You'd be like, great. I remember picking up Clear Turbulence and lots of stuff over there.
And you could not find that shit at the mall. So that was even better. So
you're not getting that at Strawberries. They had But Boston had the big Tower Record, like the big Tower Records, and they had was it
HMV? And it was an impressive store.
Is that the closing store?
What?
Is it HMV? Was that the
H&M?
No, that's the clothing store. H&M.
Yeah, H&M is the clothing store.
HMV, I guess, was the record store, and they had. I remember I picked up like Gillan Toolbox there and a few other things. They always had like some good imports there, so it's a cool place for sure. So he's in talk with Disney about this, but apparently it fizzled out because they were producing something else at the time. I want to say it was like the animated, like the Disney Robin Hood or something like that. So it kind of fizzled out. And back with Deep Purple, Glover took over the job as kind of being the liaison between Gillan and Blackmore to kind of go back and forth because they weren't talking. Blackmore claims that he never spoke to Gillan during the entire recording of Who Do We Think We Are? And he says he started holding back and not sharing his ideas because he was working on them for a couple things. One was this solo album he kept talking about, which ended up being Rainbow in later years. And then he was also working on the Babyface project with Phil Lynott and Ian Pace. So he was holding stuff back for that. Martin Birch says he never really saw any kind of confrontation, just noticed Gillan and Blackmore purposefully avoiding each other and not paying attention to each other. Blackmore said, what's that?
I was just wondering something before I forget. Was it just in your reading, was it just those two guys, or was Gillan isolating himself from everybody else, or was Blackmore pissing off everybody else too? Like, was it just those two mainly, or like how did the rest of the guys feel about everything?
You know, I'm not finding a lot of stuff that talks specifically about that, but what I'm seeing from my point of view, from what I've read, it sounds like Blackmore and Gillan they weren't impressing everyone in the group for sure. Like, but it sounded like everyone else could kind of make it work. Like it sounds like people in the group were kind of annoyed with Gillan and kind of annoyed with Blackmore, but for the most part, they could make it work. But Gillan and Blackmore just couldn't make it work, and that was the problem. It sounds like everyone else might just be rolled their eyes like, oh, here's Ian being a prima donna, or here's Blackmore going off and being all solitary and not sharing his stuff. So to me, that's what it sounds like anyway.
Yeah.
Blackmore said everyone gave their worst and called the album rubbish. Glover was a little more positive on the final result of the album, kind of enjoyed it a little bit more. The record label was starting to cash in, like we talked about last episode. They saw the end was near, and they're like, let's just get everything out we can. They released Purple Passages, which is a compilation album.
And you know what? I think I had that.
Do you have that one? I remember seeing that before. I never had it, but maybe it was you that I saw it from.
What was on it? You were about to.
It includes 4 tracks from the Deep Purple album.
Yes.
And then which was out of print at the time, so this was kind of your only way of getting it.
Yeah.
And it was great for Rod Evans because this gave him a huge influx of cash as the band was like at the peak of its popularity. People were buying up this album. Now he's getting all these huge checks from royalties on this stuff that's a couple years old.
All right, Rod.
Yeah, good for Rod. Not good in the end, but.
Well, I mean, God knows he probably didn't make much money from Captain Beyond.
Probably not.
Well, wait a minute. What about Nicky? Didn't he make any money?
No, because Nick Simper, if you remember, he signed off a deal where he just got a lump sum cash payment of like £10,000. Yeah, bad move.
Ooh, Nicky.
Nicky, bad move.
Oh,
so
man.
he got the lump sum payment and he gave up all future royalties, which was not a good move.
Oh, man.
So looking at the album cover again, we have a kind of something a little different here because they redid the album cover for this release, which I don't like. I don't like that they did that.
Looks very darker.
It's a very subtle difference. It's a little darker. They enhanced some of the photos, but the album art, it removed the bubble of text at the bottom that says like the name of the album, like the Who Do We Think We Are?
Oh yeah.
Simon Robinson in the liner note says the cover was in an attempt using an image from NASA satellite to have the heads of the 5 band members floating above the landscape. It was only partially successful, and it was altered for the US and Canadian version in an attempt to improve on the effect. Any subtlety they did manage with the complex overlaid color transparencies was lost by the cheap-looking title lettering, which we've omitted on this edition. So this is the original album cover. Things are a little more off-centered. Deep Purple is off-centered. And then you've got the Who Do We Think We Are bubble, which I think looks kind of cool. A little dated, but, that was the time. And then the new album cover darkens everything, centers the bubbles, says Who Do We Think We Are right at the top in quotes. So, again, not a major change, but a change that they made for this particular release.
Come to think of it, I think that I might have, looking at it, I recognize that. I feel like I've seen or maybe owned that version before the original one. I don't know why, but I feel like it's more familiar.
The one without the bubble text?
Yeah, the reissue or the re-release or
Yeah,
whatever.
I
Because
have the one that's like there's also one where the lettering is yellow, so I don't know if they did that to kind of make it a little more or make it stand out a little bit more, but
yeah.
but the booklet here has got some, as always. You can do a little quick ad for the special edition here. The booklet has some cool stuff in it. So it opens up like in normal kind of stories and everything. Roger Glover always takes over halfway through and talks about things. Has a little bit of a breakdown of the gatefold there with all the different stories you can read. Nice picture of Pacey playing a snare drum there. We've got some ads. There's an ad from like one of the papers. I can't tell what it's from. It says also available on tape. So Deep Purple, it's got the Who Do We Think We Are bubble there, and it looks like the same photos from the bubbles, but they don't have the on them, so it's just a circle of the pictures. So you get a really good look for them.
That's really, I like that. That's pretty nice.
Yeah, it's cool. You've got one of those ads that we were talking about last week, one of those weird ads. Is ever since they released Deep Purple's new album, I've been worked off me bleeding feet. Who do they think they are? It's got a picture of a guy there that says delivery on it, so he must be a delivery guy. He's so overworked from how many copies of this album he's had to deliver. Got a nice, great picture of the band there, all holding some gold records, smoking some cigarettes while they hang there with their golden records. You've got a picture of Ian Gillan with no shirt on, with a bottle of beer next to him. Got a naked Roger Glover playing bass there. Looking soaked. Maybe it was just really hot wherever they were. Although they would have been recording this in October in Munich. I can't imagine it's super, unless this was during the earlier sessions they did in Rome, where it would have been pretty hot. Another picture of Ian and Roger naked playing with only a guitar and a bass covering their sweet nothings, or whatever you want to call them.
What the hell is this?
I have no idea. Some more kind of things from the gatefold. There's a ad for the Woman from Tokyo. It says Woman from Tokyo is single. So I guess they're kind of, it's a bit of a stretch there. It says from the new album by Deep Purple, Who Do We Think We Are, on Warner Brothers Records. And then it's got a picture of the Billboard charts there showing Machine Head, Made in Japan, and Who Do We Think We Are, all in the charts at the same time.
Nice.
So
yeah, the woman from Tokyo looks like she was in a washing machine drum or something.
She does, right? Yeah, what is that? That does look like a washing machine drum.
Yeah, like one of those front loaders.
Yeah, totally.
One of them front loaders. One of the newfangled front loaders back in '74. Whenever they.
Wonder if they had front loaders back then. Maybe at laundromats. I don't know. You have to listen to the Speed Queen podcast for that. They'll tell you all about that. So for the album, for the remixes itself, Simon Robinson says any subtlety they did manage with the I already mentioned that. So yeah, he talks about the album cover being changed. Again, I don't know. It's one of those things. It's like a change so minor, why bother doing it? But there you have it. The tracks on the album we can get into right now. There's not a ton. We're only going to really, I think, talk about 4 of them. The first track is a remix of Woman from Tokyo. Historically, it's the precedent of the Deep Purple podcast that we don't really get into remixes. Not really enough different to talk about. But they do have a cool track right after the remix, which is an alternate version of the bridge of the song, which I'm going to play. Not hugely different, but it does take a little bit of a turn. hi-hat work by Ian Pace.
He's the only one not phoning it in here.
Everyone else is kind of fumbling around. Sounds like it was under-rehearsed.
Yeah.
And this part's kind of the same. So there you go. I mean, it's mostly just some minor variation in the chord structure, but nothing too crazy.
Yeah, it's kind of neat to hear it a little being worked out, a little raw.
Yeah, I always enjoy hearing those kind of alternate takes or alternate versions. I know, like, the ultimate thing for me as a Beatles fan was like the Beatles anthology that comes out, and they'll play, like, the Beatles were famous for doing like a song, like, let's play a song. Okay, let's play it heavy. Let's play it slow. Let's do it as a ballad. Let's do it as a rock song. Let's do it in 6/8 time. Let's do it in 3/4 time. Like, they would change things around so much in all the different versions that you get these crazy renditions of songs that sound nothing like the original. And you don't get anything as extreme here, but it's interesting to hear. So the next song is the only other song that they did in the villa in Rome when they were recording before they, in their kind of unproductive 2-week session there. And this one didn't make it onto the album, and this is a song called Painted Horse. You got like 2 guitars there going, like the left channel's like a slide guitar. Apparently Richie would not allow this one on the album.
It kind of makes me think of a cross between, like, how they would sound when they reunited and Aerosmith. Maybe because of the slide guitar.
Yeah,
Because whenever I hear, like, 70s rock slide guitar, I always think of Joe Perry, but this sounds kind of Aerosmith-ish to me.
Yeah. Apparently everyone was upset with Ian Gillan's vocal performance, and he just refused to redo it, so that's kind of why it didn't end up on the album.
Yeah, it doesn't really sound that impressive.
Like we talked about last week, it doesn't sound like he's fully invested in doing it. Almost sounds like an episode 6 song. I wonder if this was written by Glover and Gillan. Says each verse of the song is about death from a different form. As a child, as a carpenter, and then the narrator himself. It's kind of dark. And then bringing the harmonica back too. I mean, they could have easily fit this on the album. The album's only like 35 minutes long. I really like this guitar solo, but it doesn't sound good. Well, that part. But like it sounds like his guitar, like the mic is too far away from the amp. It just doesn't, it doesn't sound present in the song. I think I would have been more inclined to redo the guitar, even though the performance is good, just because the sound of it is just a little off. And this would have been one of the longer songs on the album too. Like It's almost 5.5 minutes long. This one is definitely very uncharacteristic. It doesn't sound like Deep Purple.
Yeah, I submit that it sounds like Aerosmith. They should have just sold the song to Aerosmith. But I mean, also the way that they performed it too is just really lackluster. I think it's even like less inspired than anything that wound up on the album.
And that's saying a lot coming from you. I guess Ian Gillan is reportedly in one of these books I was reading that he was kind of unhappy about this process because he felt like they were just repeating the Machine Head formula, like rent X place, bring the mobile unit, record for 2 weeks. And it's one of those things I can't fault them for trying to recreate the Machine Head formula because it resulted in an incredible album. But you can't really recreate something like that. You can't say, well, if we do all the things we did before Machine Head, we'll get another Machine Head. It just, those sorts of things just happen.
Yeah, I think that's a mistake that a lot of people make. It's like if you had that whole setup and just left it untouched and then walked away from it for like a year and then came back and unlocked the door and that everything was mic'd the same and all the equipment was the same, it wouldn't sound the same.
Right, it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
My wife tells a story about when she was a kid. They had this dog and her mother like knocked over. Well, the dog was standing on the counter and her mother had baked some muffins and she knocked over the muffins and they all fell all over the dog, and the dog's just eating all these muffins as they're falling on the dog, like raining down on him, and the dog was just in heaven. And then like till the day the dog died, he would just go over to that same point on the counter like every day, just hoping that it would happen again. You know?
Oh, that's good.
And it's one of those things that's kind of human nature and I guess canine nature, that you get these good results and you're like, well, if we just do that again, the magic will happen again. Mm-hmm. And the muffins aren't going to just fall on you every time. It's just one of those things.
I can't top that. That's like
I don't know why that just popped in my head, but
it's the best story in the world. Relating muffins falling on a dog's head is just like Machine Head and who do we think we are?
That's the kind of commentary you can expect on the Deep Purple podcast. No other podcasts are giving you this kind of biting, like cutting commentary.
Who else would draw these parallels?
I don't know, it just popped in my head.
But it's true. It's true. It's basically another way of saying what we just said. It's just like it's human nature to think that if you repeat a formula, it's going to wind up the same each time. There are so many variables. And the variable in that one is that they didn't have complete, well thought out songs, and they weren't all getting along. And the process is like, if you think that Richie and Ian really didn't speak to each other, let's just say at best they minimally spoke to each other. It's like you can't have a cohesive, inspired result because of that. Like there was no collaboration, there was no passion in it. So I mean, it's like you can't make great music that way.
Nope. Absolutely.
And they did not.
So we didn't do a rating for the alternate bridge because it just is what it is. If you had to give a rating to Painted Horse, what are you giving it?
2.
Really? That bad?
I wouldn't listen to it again. Like that one just came to me too. Like I'll go to our Google rating sheets, but I mean, I've given 2s, but I don't think I've like handed out 2s since like Mark 1.
I don't think you've handed out 2 since episode 6.
Yeah, probably. But I mean, it's very like, yeah, I mean, I definitely wouldn't listen to it again. It's just kind of like, meh. Well, how about you? If I had to twist your arm,
I'd give it a 3. I think it's just kind of like, and my 3 is kind of, for me, is just kind of like, it's there. It's a song. It doesn't jump out at me, but if it's on in the background, I'm not going to like actively like trip over myself to turn it off. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like if it came up in a mix, you're like, I would knock people over to get to the volume knob.
I'd elbow old ladies in the throat just to turn this off. Let me at that stereo, woman.
Well, yeah. I to me, it's just like if it came on in a mix, I'd be like, whatever. The song's on. You know, it's just kind of it's there. It's
Yeah, I'd walk outside and get my mail until it was over.
and you take your time because it's like 5 minutes long. You'd be like, I'm gonna really take my time getting them. How far away is your mail from your front door?
Actually, not that far. I'd have to do some other things, like maybe I don't know, take a lap around the driveway.
Just walk around the building.
But anyways, yeah, I think it was very what's the word? It's just not it. What did you call it?
It's kind of boring. It's just
yeah, I guess boring is just the best way to say it. Uninspired. It's just it doesn't stand out. There's nothing about it that makes me want to ever go back to it.
it's almost like if they sped up the tempo a bit and he like really put a little more passion in the lyrics and they fixed that guitar sounding far away like that, I think you could make it work. But again, it was like, why bother?
I mean, yeah, probably just another example of them getting through the recording sessions. I mean, if Richie and Ian weren't talking to each other or whatever, and it's just kind of like, okay, this tempo is good enough, this take's good enough. Good enough doesn't always cut it.
Right.
Like nobody was there to just be like, hey, let's try this a different way, like the Beatles example you gave.
Mm-hmm.
Let's try it this way. Let's try a reggae version. I don't know.
Yeah, and that's part of why a lot of the Beatles stuff was kind of so diverse. It was all over the map because they were just like they would do that. Like, let's do a slow version, let's do a reggae version, let's do a hard version, let's do a acoustic version, and then one of those just sticks out, and you say, oh, let's go with that. And they could have probably used a little of that for this.
Yeah. See me, I'm very one track mind. Like my version would always go to like, oh, let's try a really heavy version of it because I'm always about the hard rocking, Exactly. Let's do a ballad version. Yawn, hard rock. Speed it up, make it heavier. Turn up the gain. Let's go.
All right,
more screaming. All right, sorry.
The next song is again a remix of Our Lady. Not worth diving into. We did both really like that song from the original album, but again, it's a remix. We're not going to notice anything hugely different in that. And the song after that is another one that's kind of just a little artifact here, and that's the writing session for Rat Bat Blue. It's them trying out a bunch of different it sounds like they're kind of practicing coming back in from the solo, and you hear a lot of guitar solos in this. So last week we talked about how Richie Blackmore for this song just said, you know what, I don't care, you just take the solo, John. But listening to this, you might be like, it sounds like Richie didn't really know what to do for the solo, so maybe that's why I gave it to John. Maybe. And here we'll hear a few versions of that here.
Yeah, I actually thought this was kind of neat to listen to.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this. He can't stop Ian Pace. That sounds like Book of Taliesin right there. So one more. Well, that might.
Oh my God.
That might be it. So,
oh my God, even the writing sessions were terrible.
so
well, it's like, I don't. When you listen to the Fireball ones, you're kind of like, oh, this is kind of funny or cool, or they're, you know what I mean? Like they even sounded like on the top of their game when they did that little. What was the movie theme that they did? You remember that?
Oh, and they were just doing all like the. It sounded like they were having fun, like when they were doing all like the movie and TV shows and stuff like that. Yeah, those.
And this one is like Richie. Like if his guitar could talk.
After that take, he was probably, screw this, John, you just do a solo, I don't care. I don't.
Like if his guitar could talk, he'd be like, I don't know what's going on right now.
Totally. So nothing you can really, nothing, again, not much you can rate in that. It just is what it is. It's some outtakes.
Yeah.
The next song is the 99 remix of Rat Bat Blue. Again, it's a remix. It's nothing crazy. And then it ends with the final thing, which is the First Day Jam. So this one's interesting. Apparently, Ian and Richie and John all got to Ian Pace, Richie and John all got to the villa in Rome, and Roger got stuck in really bad traffic in Rome, and traffic in Rome can be really bad. And they were just waiting for Blackmore to get there, and they recorded this little jam with Richie Blackmore on bass, John Lord on keyboards, and Ian Pace on drums. And here you go. I loved this one. Very like kind of not Deep Purple sounding, but you've got Richie Blackmore just kind of like plugging along on bass, sounding very, very interesting. Not what you hear from necessarily from Glover or Hughes or anything. And then John Lord playing some keys, and they kind of jump all around. This is extremely long. It's almost 12 minutes long, but it shows them kind of jamming in the studio. And then as we talked about, I can just kind of talk while I like this kind of mellow little jam in the background here. We talked about last week they recorded Smelly Bati, which we don't know. I haven't heard it from anybody. Of course, that episode only released this morning, so I haven't heard from anybody if they have a copy of Smelly Bati, but I don't think it's out there.
Yeah, you know what? You got to stop saying that.
It really bothers you.
I don't like it. It's like, when people don't like when you say the word moist. Like,
yeah, that's how you feel about the smelly B word.
The smelly B word. Yeah, just say SB from now on, okay?
I guess they recorded SB, and then Conway Twitty's It's Only Make Believe. And then I guess for the special edition they didn't want to include those and John Lord, apparently John Lord is the one who said he didn't want those released. And considering the things we've heard on the special edition, like them drunk playing TV and movie scores and flubbing guitar lines and all this sort of stuff, there must be something really bad about those recordings.
Yeah. This is pretty cool. I like this.
I really like this. I listened to this because I hadn't heard, before we started doing this podcast, I hadn't heard any of these special edition albums. I had all the original CDs. So this stuff was kind of all new to me. I was listening to this at the gym last week and kind of grooving out to it. Thought it was really good. I think Richie's bass playing is great. You wouldn't expect somebody kind of a flashy guitarist or someone who's really like used to doing soloing all the time to lay down such a solid groove and stick to it, Sometimes when lead guitarists pick up basses, it becomes just a bass solo. So a few things about the album.
Yeah.
Lord said Ian's timing of leaving the band was terrible. The band was becoming absolutely massive, and it was. He felt that Burn was a tremendously good album. Really took advantage of the new lineup, but he really feels like there was a lot more good that could have come of the Mark II lineup.
Oh, definitely.
So John Lord and Melody Maker, he told Michael Watts on the last day of their U.S. tour before flying to Hawaii, then Japan, he said, about Ian, he told us 9 or 10 months ago that he wanted to leave this summer. He feels he wants out of the business entirely. What do you call it? Reevaluating? He may sing some more. In fact, knowing Ian as I do, I don't think he'd give it up completely. Lord said when the group returns to England, they are to re-examine, reevaluate their music. We want to get into regular rehearsing rather than just playing together and make an album, which is what we have been doing during the last 18 months. The only moves forward have come when we have gone to sound checks in the afternoons before gigs and sorted a few things together. I would like Deep Purple to develop into a freer group. We are a very tense band, and orgasmic solos are our trademark. We actually want to become more vocal. Hinting to the lineup change, including 2 vocalists. But I like that this groove doesn't sound like what you'd expect Deep Purple to be jamming on.
Well, I mean, what you really have here is like three members of the band who weren't disagreeing.
Yeah.
So, you know, you're getting something a little different, a little better. I kind of like this.
Kind of reminds me of like Medeski, Martin, and Wood. I mean, not this part with his like fiddling around with the knobs. But earlier when he was playing the organ, it sounded a little like Medeski, Martin, and Wood. He's getting a little crazy. I don't know what he's doing on the organ right now, but he's getting a lot. I don't know if there's organ or synth. I know he's getting a lot more into synths, and as we hear on Burn, a lot more synths become present on that one.
Yeah.
So Gillan says about this whole thing, we had just come off 18 months of touring, and we'd all had major illnesses at one point or another. Looking back, if they'd have been decent managers, they would have said, all right, stop. I want you to all go on 3 months holiday. I don't even want you to pick up an instrument, but instead they pushed us to complete the album on time. We should have stopped. I think if we did, Deep Purple would have still been around to this day.
Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, to me, like I said in the last episode, I think their management is really at fault for this.
Look at what happened to the Mark I lineup. I mean, everything that we talked about in the earlier episodes was the same thing. Was just the management trying to rush them in, rush them out, crank out products.
Yeah, what was it? 3 albums in 18 months?
Yeah.
And constantly go into the studio and do an album. We don't have any material. I don't care. Make some material and make it happen.
Yeah, make some material and then only have you do a bunch of shitty covers.
Exactly. Oh, you don't have enough material? Here's 4 covers for you. Just throw these in there.
But I mean, I think that's a kind of a thing that happens to a lot of bands. You hear those stories of just like, well, the management or this or that, you know, they forced us into the studio and then we had to go right out on tour, and you know, you get burnt out, and that's why stuff like this happens. So who knows? Maybe if what Ian said in that interview had happened, if they had taken some time off and everything, then maybe they wouldn't have. Him and Richie wouldn't have been arguing, and they might have been more inspired, and the better album might have come out. They might have gotten through the 70s. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, it's to me, it just sounds miserable. Like, especially, you've got so many talented musicians in this band with so much to give and so much that writing potential. You know, as you see when they split off. Look at all the stuff Ian Gillan did on Cher Kazoo. Look at all the stuff that Roger Glover did with the Butterfly Ball and later Elements. Look at what Blackmore did with Rainbow, and look what Pace and Lord did with Pace Ashton Lord. Like, and Lord's constantly doing these other projects on the side while he's in Deep Purple. So it's not like they couldn't have done it. They just needed very few concessions could have been made. You know, give up a month of touring, give up, you know, just wait on putting an album out. And nobody seemed to want to do it. They just wanted to get as much money as they could.
Well, yeah, and that's what it is with management, record companies at the time. If you hear any of these stories, is that it's just, to them, it's just product.
Exactly. Yep. It's ramp up production.
Just like when you were saying earlier that they when they had heard like, oh, this will probably be the end of Deep Purple, they tried to like milk every last bit of marketing and everything out of it, which is just like not always the best decisions.
I mean, I can almost understand that point of view from a business standpoint, but if you hadn't let it got to that point, you wouldn't have to be milking it for everything it's worth. You probably could have squeezed out, who knows? I mean, maybe they could have squeezed out another 4 albums with the Mark II lineup. Ian Pace, up at this point, was going back and forth between leaving with Blackmore to form a new band and staying. He was kind of like, I'm going to go with Blackmore and do this Babyface thing, but the money that started to come in with Purple convinced him, you know what, I'm going to stick around because I'm making good money now. And at this point, how old is Pace? 24?
Yeah.
Really young. Ronnie James Dio, he toured with Elf and Deep Purple for the last tour with Gillan, and he said Ian would stay in a different hotel and the rest of the band. He'd turn up at the gigs in a car 2 or 3 minutes before the gig started, go on stage and do his bit. Then as soon as it would over, he'd go back in his hotel again. We couldn't understand that. This isn't how bands should be. For me, that was the most unusual thing that ever happened on the Purple tours, seeing a side of things that I just didn't know existed. I thought bands got on really well and stayed together forever. Boy, have I learned that lesson well over the years.
Wow.
I'm sure after he became in a band with Richie Blackmore, he kind of saw probably maybe how that had come about.
Mm-hmm.
He and Blackmore didn't necessarily end things well. Now this sounds like Medeski, Martin, and Wood again here. Maybe their inspiration for their band was just listening to these jams here. So a year later in Japan, things weren't great for the band. On their last show at the Budokan, there was a huge riot after Richie walked off stage and refused to do an encore. Not good. The famous images of chairs piled up and the place destroyed is from that show. Have you ever seen that picture?
I don't think so.
I'll pull it up in a second when this jam is over.
I like how like a lot of the word that I hear the most in association with Richie is refused.
Yeah, yeah. If you had
Richie refused.
If you had to do a word cloud, it would be like dusk and refused.
It's just like Richie refused to do this. He refused to do that. It's like, again, sounds like my niece.
Yeah, exactly. Sounds like my kids.
Yeah, sounds like a 5-year-old.
I'm not brushing my teeth.
I'm not going on before dusk.
Exactly. I refuse to go on before dusk.
I refuse.
Classic John Lord just falling on the keys. So I've got a picture. Have you seen this picture of this riot that ensued?
I don't think I have.
Kind of a famous picture. Let me pull it up here for you.
Well, if you pull it up, maybe I have seen it.
So this is a picture of after the show. So
Nope.
you can see the Deep Purple stage there with their logo, and then there's just basically just chairs everywhere. So they picked up all these chairs and just threw them all about because they were all pissed off. Richie refused to do an encore. Gillan got in a fight and he said he comes in all bloody and confronts Blackmore backstage like, what the hell was that all about? And Blackmore said the audience sucked, they didn't deserve an encore, so F them. Like, great. And you're looking at, so you can see through this all these stories that I've been going through, like why both sides might bear some blame here. I can definitely see Richie's side of it in some parts, and I can definitely see I'd be pretty pissed off if I got, I'm all bloody from getting beaten up by angry fans, and then Richie's like, I didn't want to. They were a bad audience.
Yeah, I can see it. There's probably 50-50 blame right there.
So I do want to send another shout out to Jorg Planer, who hopefully I'm pronouncing his name right, because I asked him, I put it out again to the Twitter folks, like, hey, I had seen this copy of the letter that Ian Gillan wrote to resign from the band, but I couldn't find it anywhere. I Googled it. I couldn't find it. I knew I'd seen it at one point. So I put it out there, and of course he's like, oh, here you go, and sends a scan of the letter. It's not, it's not great quality. Let's see if I can find it here. But I can read it to you what it actually said. So it was in December. I think it was December of 1972, December 9th, 1972. Ian Gillan wrote this letter after a show in Dayton, Ohio, on stationery from the hotel they were staying, which is the Imperial House North. And it says right on the stationery, where every guest is a king. And he says, Dear Tony, thank you for your telegram. And they had already had some back and forth. Perhaps in my letter to you, the word affiliations misled you. I must now make it clear that my doubts lie in the direction of my own desires to perform as an artist. I am so depressed with my occupation at the moment, as well as the circumstances and attitudes I have to work with, that I felt it very necessary to put on record my intentions to leave the group on 30th of June, 1973. This decision is not impulsive, but is made after at least 6 months of thought. I am certainly not considering moving to any other companies for management, etc. It is quite simply that if, after 3 months complete break, I decide to continue in this business, I shall find a new way of expressing my ideas, or at least a more varied way. I suppose I could sum up by saying that I think Deep Purple has become a boring, stagnant machine, far removed from the refreshing, innovative group it once was. I think this was inevitable and that we should quit while we are ahead. Another advantage to deciding upon a date at least 6 months in advance is that nobody will be able to take an unfair advantage of the situation. You must admit that this is almost a probability, where matters allowed to follow an unguided course. I have already formulated a basic pattern for the future, and I shall obviously make you aware of my intentions when I reach London. Yours sincerely, Ian Gillan.
Wow.
So this, again, a scan is from Jorg Planer on Twitter, and it comes from the book, Chris Charlesworth's book, The Illustrated Deep Purple. I did look for a copy of this book because I was like, wow, this is a great book. So, of all these Deep Purple books I have, I don't have a copy of it. Let me get it. And I look it up on Amazon. It's like $264 for this 90-page book. So I was like, well, I guess I'll be relying on Jorg Planer's scans to get me through. I'm like, what stories could it possibly have in there that aren't in the other 10 books that I have?
True.
So this would have been right about the time Made in Japan was being released. He wrote this letter. And another interesting tidbit from one of the books I have, not super relevant, but it's a key from the Imperial House Hotel where he wrote that letter.
Wow.
Dayton, Ohio. Imperial House South, where every guest is king.
Wonder if it's still around.
Yeah, that'd be a good. Yeah, we should go. Maybe we should go see Deep Purple in Ohio, a neutral territory. We could stay at the Imperial House Hotel. That'd be pretty cool.
Road trip.
I wonder if they're playing Dayton, Ohio. We should look into that.
For sure.
So yeah, this was right around the time that Made in Japan was released. Ian Gillan writes in his Child in Time book that neither John or Tony asked him to reconsider or told him to take a break and think it over. John or Tony being Tony Edwards and John Coletta, their managers. He says that if he and Richie and the rest of the band had simply just taken some time off, that maybe things could have improved. As we see when they get back together in the 80s, maybe not. As 10 years had passed, or more than 10 years had passed, and they still ran into kind of the same problems.
Yeah.
He admits that he didn't want to leave, that the letter was just kind of a cry for help. He wanted people to hear that a few things. One is, hey, we need some friggin' time off to rest and be humans. And another thing is he just kind of wanted the band to try some new things, which I think you saw on Who Do We Think We Are. If the relationships between the band were better, that probably could have been a better received album because they were trying new things. They just weren't super into it.
And I mean, if you look at through the timeline, if he had been thinking about it for 6 months, then he wrote that in June, or was thinking about it, I'm sorry, since like maybe around June of 72? And then like wanted to leave, his letter said, in like June of 73. And that kind of makes you think like him and Glover joined the band like late 69?
Yeah, it would have been
Right.
like mid, like July or so.
Yeah, mid to late 69. So I mean, if you really think about it, it's like the most classic version of the band wasn't even together for like a few years. Like they were together really short.
Very short.
Which is really, it's kind of weird to think about. You think about bands like that, they've probably been together forever. And it was like, no, the history of the band is long, but that lineup is like so important, and they were only together for a few years.
Yeah, I mean, not much longer than the Mark I lineup.
Yeah, and think about too, like if they had given them a break, or they decided to call it quits or whatever, what that would have looked like if they just like went out on Machine Head and Made in Japan, and they didn't make Who Did We Think We Are.
or they saved it and, saved some of that material for, a bigger album. If they just, instead of putting an album out in, January of 1973, they'd put one out in the summer of 1973. There could have been a lot of,
Mm.
and it seems like from what I've been reading about Burn and and Stormbringer in particular, that there was a huge shift in how record companies did business at this time. And I think they were much to the detriment of a lot of great bands figuring this out, like, hey, maybe we should let these people be human beings and give them some time off, and not just time off, but time to create. You can't just under the gun come up with stuff. There has to be some way to wind down and come up. You can't, on the other hand, just sit back and wait for inspiration to strike, because you do have to sometimes just get to work and force yourself, but not under these conditions.
Oh yeah, I mean it's and I mean I'm sure it's different for like everybody. I mean the first three Kiss albums were done under duress, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
I mean by the time they got to their third album, they had like no material, and they're just like, all right, then they just go like they'd walk into the studio every day, and be like, all right, what's today's song, and they just throw something together. And admittedly, a lot of people think that's not one of their best albums. One of my favorites.
Yeah.
But it works different for every band.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's still one of those things. It was just kind of, and it was around that same period was my point too. Like the early 70s was just kind of like, come on, you got to get back in the studio. We got to put you out on tour, blah, 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 and, but as they got more successful, they got more time, the luxury of more time to work on material and albums and everything. So,
right.
But and unfortunately did not work out that way for our boys here. So
it did not at all. So yeah, he felt the band was losing integrity. John Lord said it kind of broke his heart, that he issued this cry for help and nobody really heard it. Nobody meaning the management. They really thought it was Richie that was going to leave and do this project with Phil Lynott, but that never materialized. Then they summoned John and Roger. Tony Edwards and John Coletta bring John and Roger to this restaurant and say, hey, if you convince Pace to stay and not go off with Blackmore, we'll find a new guitarist and a new singer. But then management at the same time also asked Blackmore what it would take for him not to leave, and he said he wasn't into what Roger was doing, and he said, but it's not, in interviews now, he definitely comes off as trying to be the nice guy. He says, well, I thought I should leave the band, but I wasn't into what Roger was doing, but that wasn't fair to him because he didn't do anything wrong. But at the end of the day, they heard that and said, well, Glover's got to go. And Ian Pace says he was just a kid partying, living day to day, not worrying about what would happen next. And he kind of left decisions to Richie and John. He's like, those are kind of the grown-ups. Let them what they're going to do. I'm not really, I'm just going to do whatever they decide. So in early 1973, they agreed that they're going to fire Roger if Richie would stay. And Richie felt awkward saying that he'd rather leave and start something new, but they didn't want that. So Roger eventually goes to Tony Edwards because he's getting this feeling like as soon as this decision's made, everyone's starting to treat him differently because they know it's happening. And he's like, hey, what's going on? What's going on? Like, oh, nothing's wrong. No, it's fine. And he's like, no. So he corners Tony Edwards, and then, in one of these documentaries, you can see him talking about it, and that they said Tony tells him that Richie wants him out of the band, and Roger gets really choked up, and even to this day, just kind of like, he's like, well, F them, I'll be the gentleman. I'll fulfill my duties. I'll play all the shows that we've booked through with Gillan, and then I'm gone. So, and Roger sat next to John on the flight home, and John said he felt really bad for what had happened, and Roger said he felt a little bit more let down by John and Ian Pace than by Richie for just kind of letting this happen. And then on the final night of the final night, they play the final concert, they get off, and then Richie says to Glover, hey, it's nothing personal, it's just business, which I don't think made Glover feel any better. Blackmore was starting to withdraw from the band still. He was continuing to withdraw from the band. And then Roger Glover is quoted as saying, "It had gotten to the point where Ritchie wasn't interested in doing anybody else's ideas. I remember in particular coming up with a chord sequence, which I thought was an interesting idea for a song. I'd written this out on a piece of paper. I said to Pacey, like, start this rhythm about this time. Jart starts playing. I start playing. But Ritchie just looks over his shoulder and says, no, we're going to do this instead," and starts playing and, this other riff. And he kind of does a dig on Ritchie at this point. He says something, it might have been Mary Long or perhaps another one, something mid-tempo. A lot of his riffs were starting to sound the same, nearly all variations in G. And then that's it. They go to Osaka, and on June 29th, 1973, they play their final show. And this is audio of Gillan's. It's on one of the bootlegs. It's called Gillan's Last Speech. The audio quality is not 100%, but here's kind of what he says.
All I want to say to all of you is thank you very much. You did great. Thank you for everything you've given us in Japan. And thank you, really, you're the representatives of the whole world as far as we're concerned. Thank you, and God bless you for everything you've ever given us. This is the last night, the end. God bless you. Thanks a lot. Good night.
So he says, all I want to say to all of you is thank you very much. You've been great. Thank you for everything you've given us in Japan. And thank you. Really, you're the representatives of the whole world as far as we're concerned. Thank you, and God bless you for everything you've ever given us. This is the last night, the end. God bless you. Thanks a lot. Good night. And with that,
Wow.
the famous Mark II lineup of Deep Purple comes to an end.
Wow, that's pretty amazing that that's was captured.
Yeah, it's great.
This bootleg. That's cool.
So that's it. That's the end of Deep Purple Mark II. And in our next episode, we'll be going into the Mark III lineup, how that started, all that fun. So, we had kind of a long episode we couldn't cram all this into one episode, or else it would have been like 3.5, closer to almost 4 hours. So this episode's a little shorter because we're just kind of taking this tail end of the Mark II lineup into account. And I do have a couple of quick news things. So where are we here? Windows are all over the place. So in the news, just the other day, I think it was Tuesday, Ian Gillan released, or it might have been Friday. My week's kind of all messed up. The Ian Gillan released this album, Contractual Obligation, which I think is awesome.
That's brilliant.
So it's a three-parter. So it's Ian Gillan live with the Don Airey Band and Orchestra, playing 3 dates. This is the art for day 3, which was in St. Petersburg. They played another show in Warsaw. And where are my notes here? Okay. So the first show was live in Moscow, and that's a Blu-ray. The second one is live in Warsaw, which is a double CD. And then the third show is live in St. Petersburg, which is on 3 LPs. So on the website, I'll put the links in the show notes. You can order these. Still fresh from the success of the studio album Now What, and just a few months before release in the latest equally successful album Infinite, Ian Gillan accepted the offer to tour for a month in Eastern Europe with a full rock show, accompanied every night by a different local orchestra. Gillan decided to recruit the Don Airey Band, which features the guitar talent of Simon McBride. All shows were truly unique, with Airey and McBride delivering perfect performances night after night. Deep Purple material includes rarities like Razzle Dazzle or Anya, went hand in hand with Gillan's solo songs and surprises for those into the deepest catalog. The title is a humorous reference to Ian Gillan's notorious reticence to pay any attention to his own or Deep Purple live releases, as he explains in the album liner notes. This live album and video might be one of the nicest chapters in Gillan's solo production ever, and a reminder about how great his solo music and concerts have been over the years. Curiosity, the last Deep Purple album, was named Infinity, which later turned into Infinite, during the afternoon preceding the Warsaw show that ended up being immortalized for this CD release. And there's lots of different songs on there kind of spanning the whole Deep Purple back catalog, some of his solo stuff, all sorts of stuff. So kind of cool.
They could have picked a better picture of him. While you're talking, I'm looking at it, and it's he just looks like an old man holding a microphone. It's like
it's what he is.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I feel like they could have picked a better picture of him at this.
I think I've talked about this before. I just love how Ian Gillan does not give a crap about like trying to look like a rock star. He's just like, look at that shirt he's wearing. It's like a pineapple. It's like a I don't even know what you call it, but it's like a slot machine.
Yeah.
That's rendered like the top of a pineapple, some guy with sunglasses, and then the bottom of a pineapple. So it's like, what does that shirt even mean? Why is he wearing it? He doesn't care. He's like, I'm Ian Gillan. What do I have to prove? I'm just gonna grab whatever T-shirt I feel comfortable in, and that's what. Sometimes he wears this like a white, just almost like
like a white suit, right?
Like a white suit, but really loose fitting, like what you'd wear if you were like in Saudi Arabia or something.
Well, when I see that, I always think of like, he just got off the deck of the boat and he like, hey, I just came back from the Bahamas. Where's my Mai Tai? Smoke on the water.
Yeah, I was just cleaned up a shuffleboard. Give me my mic.
He probably does. Oh, but they're still awesome though. I mean, if you look back at the people, I think that this is truly like a great era though for music for these bands, because back when they first came out, who the hell was 70 years old and still like performing heavy music or this type of music, rock music or whatever?
Nobody.
Like all these bands. I mean, even like the remaining guys from the Beatles,
Mm-hmm.
the Rolling Stones, Deep Purple, Kiss even. I mean, these guys are all like 70s or pushing 70s or beyond their 70s, and they're still getting out there doing songs from like they were in their 20s.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at, and of this time, like you look at old videos or whatever of people you considered old, and they're like younger than you are now, and they look like old men, So it's like,
well, yeah, I mean, I think that like I had heard from somewhere when the Rolling Stones did their Steel Wheels tour back in like '89, I think it was. They called it the Steel Wheelchair Tour, and like Mick Jagger was like freaking my age now. It's like, and now it's what 30 years later, and he's still performing. But
yeah, that's I remember being in the 80s, people making jokes about how old Rolling Stones are, and they're still out there playing. And making the same jokes they're making now about Keith Richards.
And they're like, they're 40. Like, give me a break. It's like, Christ, I could still do pull-ups and burpees and stuff like that. How is that old? Like, those guys were probably doing that back then. But I mean, but the point being is that it's still like, it's a very unique, I think, time. So, but it's really cool to see that people can get all decked out and go and still do the rock star thing like Mick Jagger, but they can also not give a shit like Ian Gillan. Because really, like you said, who does he got to prove anything to?
It's like, whatever. I'm just wearing whatever I want. Like I'll wear goofy sunglasses. I'll do, like, he doesn't care. Yeah. But I've seen some of the performances from the show. Like, they did release some like in promos, and I mean, they put on a really good show. It's funny, like, it's like Ian Gillan with the Don Airey band. It's like, why is this Deep Purple? It's just funny that I'm sure there's some sort of contractual reason he had to do something solo different or whatever. It's just so it's always funny to me. It's like with Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, and he's like, I'm going to do a solo album, but I'm going to use most of the Heartbreakers on it, and it's going to sound exactly like Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. It's just,
Well, we're not going to call it the Heartbreakers, though.
it's like, why at that point, why bother? It's like, I'm gonna do a solo thing, but I'm gonna use my keyboardist and his band to do it. Like, it's just it's odd that you would go that route. But
Oh, I know. That's
there you
funny.
have it. And finally, this week in Deep Purple history, being the week this is released, August 5th through August 11th, on August 8th, 1942, my mother's birthday, actually, John Gustafson was born.
John Gustafson's your mother? It's the way that it came out. It sounded really funny.
Now you know why you know why I love John Gustafson so much.
Nate's birth mother.
Of course, he is actually my my biological mother. He's from Quatermass, of course, and amongst other things, Ian Gillan Band. Great bass player, great singer, great musician. Did a lot with Roxy Music, which I'm not as familiar with their stuff, but I'm more familiar with his Deep Purple leaning stuff. But he's a great musician, unfortunately, that passed away too young. On August 8th, 1980, also my mother's birthday, although she wasn't born in 1980, Gillan releases Glory Road, their third album.
Good album.
Which we will be getting to one of these days. And then on August 7th, a day before my mother's birthday, 2002, Ian Pace releases Not for the Pros, an instructional video on how to play the drums. So kind of cool.
Nice.
Pick that up on DVD if you're a drummer looking to pick up some great tips from the master himself. Couple of quick things. And of course, we always post these on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, all the latest cool anniversary dates to celebrate. So definitely check them out. Yeah, and I think, as we wrap up Mark II, thinking about future episodes, I was thinking once we get through all the proper albums, maybe we could take a look at that big list of potential episodes we have, and we can alternate episodes. And at the end of the episode, like, tell the other one what we're going to do next week. Like, your week to pick, we're going to cover this album, or, whatever it is.
Episode roulette.
unless we start getting to like our 4-parter butterfly baller thing, that's going to have to be mapped out. But if we're just talking about like a single topic or a single band or a single album or release or something, we can alternate back and forth when we get to that point. And take a little break, just like Deep Purple did, before we get back into their proper albums.
Of course.
And we do not dismiss Steve Morse. We love Steve Morse. All right. With that, I think we're calling a wrap on this episode. Anything else to throw in there before we call it quits?
No, this is the end. I love you all.
This is the
or whatever. Yeah, on to the next chapter.
I like you're the representatives of the world. I don't know.
Yes, all of you, all 16 people or however many people are listening.
Yes. Oh, we got much more than that now. We're really humming along. So, all right, to all of you, you are the representatives of the world. We love you. And until next week, have a great one. We'll have some more great information about some newcomers to the band when we join you next week.
Yeah, a couple of noobs called Coverdale and Hughes.
All right. See you next week.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Deep Purple podcast. If you like what you hear and would like more episodes in the future, please donate on Patreon to support the show. You can also give us a rating on iTunes to help new people discover the show. You can follow us on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook for show updates. See deeppurplepodcast.com for more details. Thank you for listening.